The Super Naval Battle of Leyte Gulf, the largest sea battle in naval history. October 1944. Across the waters of the Philippines, warriors prepared to turn themselves into living weapons, the final desperate act of a dying empire. Facing them was one of the largest armadas ever assembled in human history. This was more than just a battle. It was the Super Naval Battle of Leyte Gulf, the greatest naval confrontation of all time. A clash of bold strategies, fatal miscalculations, and unimaginable courage that would decide the fate of the entire Pacific front. So what truly happened in this cataclysmic battle, the largest naval engagement the world has ever seen? The gathering storm. By late 1944, the balance of power in the Pacific had tilted decisively in favor of the Allies. Since their crushing defeat at Midway, the Imperial Japanese Navy had been in relentless retreat, driven from one strategic island after another. Meanwhile, the United States, with its immense industrial might, was not only replacing losses, but producing fleets of increasingly modern warships and aircraft. Amid this backdrop, the Allied High Command faced a crucial strategic choice: invade Taiwan or liberate the Philippines, still under Japanese control. General Douglas MacArthur, who had left the Philippines 2 years earlier with his famous vow, "I shall return," strongly pushed for the latter. For him, it was not merely a military objective, but a matter of honor. Eventually, the plan to liberate the Philippines was approved. Beyond freeing its people, the campaign carried immense strategic value. The Philippines sat like a massive cork, sealing Japan's oil and resource supply routes from Southeast Asia. Lose that lifeline, and Japan's war machine would suffocate. On the 20th of October 1944, American forces began landing on the island of Leyte. To protect the landing, the U.S. Navy deployed a massive force divided into two main fleets. The 7th Fleet, under Vice Admiral Thomas Kinkaid, directly supported the landings. Providing cover from afar was the formidable 3rd Fleet, commanded by Admiral William "Bull" Halsey, one of America's most aggressive and celebrated naval officers. At the core of Halsey's 3rd Fleet was Task Force 38, a powerful strike group of fast carriers and modern battleships. Altogether, the Allied force numbered over 300 warships, including 34 carriers and 1,500 aircraft. Faced with this overwhelming armada, Japan had no choice but to stake everything on one final desperate gamble. The bold plan, Japan's final gamble. Recognizing the dire situation, the Imperial Japanese Navy drafted Operation Shō-Gō 1, Victory Operation Number 1, a complex and perilous plan that committed nearly all remaining Japanese naval forces. The operation would strike from 3 directions. The Northern Force, commanded by Vice Admiral Jisaburo Ozawa, would act as bait. It included Japan's remaining carriers, among them Zuikaku, the last survivor of Pearl Harbor. But these ships were nearly empty, carrying only a handful of inexperienced pilots. Ozawa's mission was not to fight, but to lure Admiral Halsey's 3rd Fleet away from Leyte. The Southern Force, led by Vice Admirals Shoji Nishimura and Kiyohide Shima, would attack Leyte Gulf from the Surigao Strait. The Central Force, the strongest, commanded by Vice Admiral Takeo Kurita, boasted a formidable fleet, including the Yamato and Musashi, the 2 largest battleships ever built. Kurita's goal was to slip through the San Bernardino Strait, strike Leyte Gulf, and annihilate the American landing forces. On paper, Operation Shō-Gō was brilliant. The Japanese bet everything on Halsey's aggressiveness, hoping he would take the bait and chase Ozawa's decoy carriers north. But the plan had fatal flaws. Japanese fleets operated almost blind, restricted by radio silence and lacking reconnaissance aircraft. The Americans, too, had their own weakness. Halsey's 3rd Fleet reported to Admiral Chester Nimitz in Pearl Harbor, while Kinkaid's 7th Fleet answered to General MacArthur. Without a single unified commander on site, coordination relied entirely on communication. and those gaps would soon lead to chaos. The four fateful engagements. The colossal clash began on the 23rd of October 1944, when two U.S. submarines detected Kurita's central force and sank two heavy cruisers. Kurita survived but lost the element of surprise. The Battle of Leyte Gulf had begun. 1. The Battle of the Sibian Sea, October 24. The execution of Musashi. Once discovered, Kurita's fleet endured relentless air assaults from Halsey's Task Force 38. Wave after wave of American aircraft bombarded the Japanese ships, focusing on Musashi, one of the two giant battleships. Hour after hour, Musashi became the target of a fiery storm from the skies. Despite her immense armor, she couldn't withstand the punishment. After at least 19 torpedoes and 17 bombs, the mighty Musashi capsized and sank, taking over 1,000 sailors with her. Under crushing air attacks, Kurita briefly ordered a retreat, leading Halsey to believe the central force had been neutralized. 2. The Battle of Surigao Strait, night of Octet 24-25. The last battleship duel. In the south, Admiral Nishimura steamed into Surigao Strait, unaware that the U.S. 7th Fleet had set a deadly trap. Admiral Jesse Oldendorf deployed his forces in a textbook, crossing the T formation. At the strait's mouth, 6 old battleships and numerous cruisers waited, guns trained. When Nishimura's ships entered range, American radar-guided salvos lit up the night sky. Within minutes, Japanese ships were shattered and burning. Surigao Strait marked the last battleship-on-battleship gun duel in history, a decisive American victory. 3. The Battle off Cape Engano, October 25. The perfect decoy. By the evening of October 24, believing Kurita's force had retreated, Halsey received the report he'd been waiting for. Ozawa's carriers had been spotted to the north. True to his aggressive nature, Halsey made a fateful choice. He took the entire Third Fleet north to destroy them. A vague dispatch from Halsey led Kincaid to assume Halsey had left a covering force behind at San Bernardino Strait. In reality, the strait was left completely unguarded. The Japanese decoy had worked. On October 25, Halsey's planes struck and sank all 4 of Ozawa's carriers, including Zuikaku. But while Halsey celebrated victory, disaster loomed to the south. 4. The Battle off Samar, October 25. The impossible stand. After temporarily retreating, Kurita turned around and slipped through the unguarded San Bernardino Strait. At dawn, October 25, his powerful central force appeared off the island of Samar. Instead of Halsey's fleet, they faced a small escort group known as Taffy, 6 tiny escort carriers, protected by just 3 destroyers and 4 destroyer escorts. When the towering silhouettes of Japanese battleships emerged, American sailors could hardly believe their eyes. The David versus Goliath confrontation had begun. Rear Admiral Clifton Sprague ordered his destroyers to charge the enemy, a suicidal move meant to buy time. The tin can destroyers, USS Johnston, USS Hull, and USS Samuel B. Roberts, bravely launched torpedo runs against overwhelming odds. All 3 were sunk, but their heroism created chaos and confusion in Kurita's ranks. Believing he was facing elements of Halsey's powerful fleet and fearing encirclement, a weary Kurita made one of the most controversial decisions in naval history. He ordered a retreat. His withdrawal saved the U.S. landing force from certain annihilation. Analysis and aftermath. The birth of the Kamikaze. Leyte Gulf also marked the debut of Japan's terrifying new weapon, the Kamikaze. On October 25, a squadron of suicide pilots struck the escort carriers. One Zero fighter crashed into USS Street Low, triggering massive explosions that sank the ship. It became the first major warship in history sunk by a kamikaze, heralding a new, desperate phase of the war. Tactical errors. After the battle, historians endlessly debated the commander's decisions. Admiral Halsey was heavily criticized for taking the bait, and abandoning Leyte, nearly causing disaster. Meanwhile, Admiral Kurita's withdrawal, when victory seemed within reach, remains one of naval history's great mysteries. Whatever his reasons, his retreat sealed the fate of Operation Shō-Gō. Losses and results. The Battle of Leyte Gulf ended on the 26th of October 1944 in catastrophic defeat for Japan. 4 carriers, 3 battleships, 8 cruisers, and 12 destroyers lost. Over 10,000 sailors killed. The Allies lost far less. 1 light carrier, 2 escort carriers, 2 destroyers, and 1 destroyer escort, with about 3,000 casualties. After Leyte Gulf, the Imperial Japanese Navy ceased to exist as an effective fighting force. The road to liberate the Philippines and ultimately Japan itself lay wide open. Conclusion. The Super Battle of Leyte Gulf was not only the largest naval engagement ever fought in scale, area, and firepower, but also a decisive turning point in World War II. It marked the final battleship duel, the supremacy of carrier warfare, and the birth of the Kamikaze strategy. It was a saga of valor, sacrifice, brilliance, and tragic error. The defeat at Leyte broke Japan's naval backbone and accelerated the empire's fall. So, what do you think between Halsey's blunder and Kurita's retreat, which was the true turning point of the battle? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want to learn more about the tragic fate of Musashi's sister ship, don't miss our next episode, Yamato, the final voyage of the largest battleship in history. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications for more epic stories from history.